So, Tim, you're back in the Emmy race this year for Game of Thrones. You are the supervising sound editor on that show, and you've won for it before. Welcome back to the Emmy race. Let me just, before we get into your work on season 7, let me go ahead and ask the questions I know everybody who's watching this video wants to know. Have you started work on season 8 yet?
We have not started yet. We'll be starting shortly. Just waiting for them to get a little bit more farther along in picture editorial and visual effects before we get going on it.
Well, now I've got the headline out of the way, so let me let me ask you about your work on season 7. You're nominated for the episode "The Spoils of War." Out of all the great episodes that you could have submitted, why did you choose this one?
It was a tough one. There's, all the episodes are great. A couple of them stand out as being, bigger and better as episodes and more, more work that had gone into them. It was kind of a toss up between Spoils of War and Beyond the Wall, the big battle on the frozen lake. I don't know. I talked about it with the crew, and we just kind of decided that one kind of showcases a little bit more. From sound design to sound effects to loop group to dialogue and ADR, it just kind of seemed to run the gamut and showcase everybody involved in the crew.
So take us through some of the signature sequences. I think I know which one you're going to talk about, but tell us a little bit about how your work and the work of everybody on your team helps enhance one of those signature sequences, one of those signature battle sequences in Game of Thrones.
Okay. The main sequence in Spoils of War is a battle between the Lannister army and the Dothraki army, and of course, along with the Dothraki army comes Khaleesi and her dragons. So we have multiple people working. We have a sound designer, Paula, who handles the dragon side of things. Sound effects editor Brad, who cuts a lot of the battle stuff. I do a lot of the effects editorial on it as well. Tim Hands, our ADR supervisor, is the one who shoots all the loop group, which on an episode like that, there is a ton of loop group. A lot of, people might not realize, but majority of the voices you hear other than the principal actors is done after the fact by the loop group actors. So they're, the battle cries, the yelling, the screaming, the death screams, all that kind of stuff is done in post-production in a quiet little studio in London. Plus there's some production dialogue that's in there that Paul, my dialogue editor, handles, and then a ton of ADR that has to go into it, because most of the production sound that's recorded on set is not usable because of directors yelling, extras yelling, wind machines, fans, all sorts of other noises. So, as supervisor, I kind of wrangle all the pieces and talk to everybody about what they're in charge of, what they need to do, make sure it gets done, make sure no holes are left in there, and bring it to the dub stage for Annalie and Matt to do their magic with it.
Can you talk a bit about the decision-making process, shall we say?
Right.
You've got all these different elements that you're working with. You mentioned the dragons, the fire, the screaming, the dialogue. How do you help create something that does not sound absolutely chaotic? How do you choose what to highlight at certain moments, and how do you make it sound as if it's all of a whole?
A lot of that has to do with the mixers. We cover just about everything you see. We put a ton of detail into the show, and yes, if you were to all just play everything at once, it's going to be chaotic. So when we get to the dub stage, we start to rough it all in, and then a lot of times we'll do what we call a peaks and valleys pass, where we will find the stuff that needs to peek through and take the other unimportant stuff, pull it back or a little bit, or pull it completely out, just to give room for stuff to breathe. So we find, we make the decision on the dub stage as what's going to work, what story-wise is most important to hear. Even though you might see something in the background going on, you've got a dragon flying overhead. You need to make sure to hear that dragon coming. Even though you're cheating, it might be a mile away. You need to hear that more than the people you see battling, off to the side of the screen. So we make those decisions on the dub stage. Myself and Annalie and Matt, we all work on that together. When producers come in, we also, continue those kinds of discussions. But they're, on the editorial side, we do tend to cover all of it, so that it's all available for the mixers to, pick and choose and figure out what's going to work best for the show.
When it comes to those quieter sequences, can you talk a bit about what your work entails there? I mean, some of the more dialogue-driven sequences. Um, how is your work differ on something like that than on one of these big battle sequences?
When it comes to the quieter sequences, it's a lot about texture. It's a lot about finding interesting, elements to put in the ambience of the locations, be it at Winterfell or King's Landing or something like that. Finding the right birds that would kind of tuck in the background, various voices, winds, distant waves. We like to really find, good details, specific things to kind of place in there. So it's not just, so it's not a bore, I don't want to say boring dialogue scene. It's not a boring scene, but it's, to give it a little bit more life in the background and make it feel a little bit more real. If you're standing outside, it's not just a quiet, you know, air. You hear, specific cars going by and maybe a bird and somebody talking, and it's a matter of trying to find the right elements, to texture these locations. And some locations are a lot thicker than others, and some of them the showrunners want to be quiet. When you get it to the upper floors of the King's Landing, they don't want to hear any voices. They want a little bit of wind, a distant bird, and keep it pretty simple.
You mentioned the showrunners, and can you talk a bit about how they help you make those decisions? I mean, what is that collaboration like, and how has it grown over the years?
Well, David and Dan, David Benioff and Dan, DB Weiss, they're the showrunners. I meet with them right as I start each episode. We have what's called a spotting session. We sit down and watch the episode and talk about what it is they're looking for in the episode. And some of it's pretty obvious. We skip through it pretty quickly, and other detail oriented things we'll sit and discuss. What are you looking for here? What's the important things to showcase in this scene? Or story wise, is there something that I might not get visually that you're wanting to sell with sound? So we'll discuss that, and then generally they won't hear anything again until final playback, unless there's some really subjective stuff that we want them to hear ahead of time, or we'll make a quick time and send it to them. We generally will do our thing. The only other producer really who sees it before then would be Greg Spence, who's kind of in charge of post. We bounce a lot more off of him. He knows the showrunner's taste, and we know the showrunner's taste pretty well by now, that we tend to do a good majority of the work without their input, and then we play it back for them once we feel we've got it into a good place. And then we start, fine tuning certain things. Oh, the dragon needs to be bigger here, or music's too loud here, pull it back, or we need to hear more of this element or that element.
To that point, I mean, has it gotten easier as the years have gone on? I mean, you guys have gotten more ambitious in terms of what you're doing season by season. So I have to imagine that the work is still very difficult. But I mean, have you developed a shorthand? Has it gotten easier to just kind of get this stuff done, knowing what they expect of you?
It's definitely easier. I think we know their taste very well. So we know what to spend our time on and what not to waste our time on. So that definitely helps. So if season 3 and season 7 were the exact same episode, season 7 would feel relatively easy. But of course, every season they tend to up their game. So episodes get bigger, battles get bigger. Episodes are they start to get a little bit longer generally. Last season there were a couple of episodes past the hour mark, if not quite a bit past the hour mark. And there's the battles are just getting bigger, and there's just more detail to put in there. We've had quite a few massive battle episodes that they didn't do anything like that back in season 2, 3. Season 4 was the first one that I worked on that really had the beginnings of those battles. And when you see the battles in episode 7, it makes episode 4 not seem like that big of an episode anymore.
Right. And in terms of fan expectations as well. I mean, you guys have a rabid and devoted fan base. Also, I mean, Emmy voters as well love your work. TV critics. Does that put any kind of added pressure on you guys to keep upping your game each season?
To be honest, not so much. I think we're all hard enough critics on ourselves and perfectionists enough that we want to up our game. So, is there some pressure there? Yeah, but I think we put more pressure on ourselves than we might get from critics or anything. I think, we generally view the critics more, they're more paying attention to story and what the writers and producers and actors are doing. So our work is kind of, doesn't usually get that kind of a spotlight on it, but except for amongst our peers. But we definitely try to up our game every season, and generally the episodes that they give us make us have to up our game. I'm very curious. I have not seen anything from season 8 yet, but I have a pretty solid feeling that we'll be forced to up our game considerably this season. I'm sure they're going to go out with a bang.
Well, your work certainly helps make those performances and writing all much better, considering that it makes it easier to hear what they're saying and what's going on.
Right.
I want to ask about your Emmy win. You won in 2015 for the show's 5th season. That was also the first year that the show won Best Drama Series and pretty much swept throughout both the creative arts and the primetime ceremony. So tell us a little bit about your victory. You had been nominated a few times before that, both for this show and for CSI Miami. So what did it mean to finally win?
It meant a lot. I won't lie. Yes, it's an honor to be nominated, and it's wonderful to be recognized by your peers. But to stand up on stage holding that trophy and looking out and thanking my crew and really thinking about getting the attention for that episode, it was a very special moment. There's no doubt that episode, which would be Hard Home, was a huge episode and a big undertaking by myself and everybody else in the crew. It wore us out pretty hard. But no, it was very special to get that win and to share it with everybody in the crew.
I know you haven't begun work yet on the last season, so you've got a little bit of time before you have to really think about this. But knowing that the end is coming and that you're going to be saying goodbye to the show that's been a huge part of your life and a huge part of television history, what does that mean to you? What is your level of anticipation like for that?
We're all very excited for this final season. I'm sure it's gonna be very mixed emotions because it's an amazing show to be a part of. Also a somewhat exhausting show to be a part of. It definitely pulls you in for a good solid 4, 5, 6 months of your life every year. It'll be sad because it's as big as this show is and all that, it's really a fantastic crew of people. And I'm not just talking, the sound crew that I get to work with, but the showrunners are top notch to work with, and the producers on the show and the visual effects crew, because we work somewhat closely with them. I mean, everybody involved is really a pleasure to work with. Even the actors, when working with them in ADR, they're really wonderful to work with. They're very professional, but it's definitely, it's a fun show to be a part of. It will be sad when it's done because I know quite a few people just refer to me as the Game of Thrones guy. So that's going to have to kind of move on after this happens. But we'll see. Keep looking out for the next big one out there. But I don't know when another big one like this will come along.
Well, I certainly look forward to seeing what you guys are going to do to wrap this all up, as I know that everyone in America is as well, across the globe, I should say.
Right.
Tim, thank you so much. Congratulations on another Emmy nomination, and
Thank you so
congrats
much.
on your work.
Great. Thank you so much. Great talking to you.
Great talking to you as well. Have a good